mandatory. They're mandated by the Commonwealth, or they're reflecting increases in our insurers. In particular, there are changes to the actuarial assumptions that are used for the Virginia retirement system, and that drives some of those changes. So these are the sorts of mandatory increases that we've got to deal with. Below that in the green is really the board saying these are the things that we think are important. And this boils down to a step increase for eligible employees, which averages out to an increase of about 2.7%. And that just under $1 million for that. There's also built into our budget request basically takes our salary scale and moves it up as a whole in order to remain competitive with the local jurisdictions around us. This is, in total, a structure that is similar to the sorts of changes that are being proposed in other local school divisions. The details for all of those, in some cases, are fairly complex, but they're in large part comparable to what's shown here. Priority number 2 is a set of investments for our future that are aligned with our divisional goals. These boil down into this table that's described here, but that represents the end process of a very long collaborative process through the division to identify what would be priority investments, look at them on a division-wide level, and then bring forward the top choices here. At the top, under the category, and in here you see what the item is, how it is aligned with our primary goals, and what the amount would be in 21. At the top is an additional person to help coordinate our middle years program at the high school and middle school. It is a big enough job that it needs 2 people to do. And we've learned that over the past few years. So in order to be able to provide the sort of IB support that we want to be able to provide, that's in here. I said earlier that we had had good success with emphasis, and that's what this next line here represents. A new person, a new job as language arts coordinator for the division that will help us close the gaps for those students who need extra support to be able to achieve the highest that they can in the language arts. We also have a focus this year on caring community and culture, and one element of that is an additional social worker to help support the needs of our students emotionally and their well-being as a whole. There are some adjustments that we're proposing to make to contract to certain individuals, some individuals who are on an 11-month contract that really should be on a 12-month contract, and some other adjustments that add up there. And then at our Jesse Thackeray Preschool, there is a need to increase our office support and our clinic support so that we can free up our director there to be able to do higher level support for the students and for the school and for the staff that needs to get done. We love having folks care at all levels, but this frees up that caring to be distributed in a way that works more effectively. And then finally, we are opening a new high school, and that new high school comes with 100,000 extra square feet to maintain, and part of that is custodial support here to make sure that that new school is up and going. Other investments came through that process, and they're not on this list because they are on a list that shows up in another slide, and I'll talk about those in a minute. So those are our priority investments. That's where we intend to be spending money. But where is the additional funding coming from? So as I said earlier, we have some good news from the Commonwealth. We expect to see a significant increase in state funding, largely due to a rebaselining exercise that they have done to fund at a higher level the standards of quality for the state of Virginia. This is money that we can use because we already have quality that exceeds the requirements, so we can use this elsewhere. A little bit less money from federal sources, but it's basically flat. It's a fairly small difference. And then we have gone through and identified savings within the budget from reductions and from realignments, particularly salary lapse, as people who are paid at a high level and have retired or otherwise left the division are replaced with people perhaps with less experience. But there's a little bit of savings there. And then there's some other savings largely related to retirement benefits and benefits for our employees. That leaves down here our city transfer request, and I'll come back to that, as I said before. I would like to point out that the savings from reductions and realignments may not be as you find these, but we keep scrubbing and we keep finding, and so we are going to keep that up, but it may not be the same next year. I said that there are unfunded needs, and during the budget process, the staff identified a variety of additional needs that we were unable to include in the advertised budget. And we do maintain this list as a record of those unmet needs, partially so that if additional funding comes forward, the board can reprioritize this list, which right here is just an alphabetical order, so not order of priority. And also because this allows us to remember what we need when we come to next year. Last year's list of unfunded needs have all been included in this year's budget, and that's having this information is very helpful for that process. So to wrap it all up in one slide, this is intended to summarize everything that I've talked to you about. The top three lines are our two big priorities and the total increase in the expenditures across the division, an increase just over $2.5 million. The next chunk is the change that we are expecting in revenues. State revenue increase, a slight decrease in the federal revenue, some savings that we have identified, so I'm treating that as revenue in this figure, it's really savings. And so that ends up with us making a request of a city transfer of $1.34 million, and that's at 3.1%. It's actually a little bit more with the 3.3% that's available, but that number was just known. So that basically brings that to a close, except for one thing. I opened with thanks. I want to close with thanks, and I want to thank again our staff and my colleagues in our community. But I also want to thank you for your partnership over the years and in your support of our schools and your engagement. We've had a lot of joint successes, and particularly in the last few years since I've been on the board, I just thought about this, and we've had the high school project and the West End Little City Commons. We've had our spirit of our revenue sharing framework, even though it's just a framework, and the recent budget cycles, as Mr. Shields alluded to for the last couple of years. We've been within guidance, and that's made a much smoother process. So I'm looking forward to answering any questions that you might have, and thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll start with thank you as well. You guys have done some really great things, seeing your accomplishments, and with kids. Many of us have kids in the school system. I think we're all well aware of the great work you all are doing, and I think working together we can accomplish some great things, and we're in the midst of that right now. So we greatly appreciate it. I don't know how we want to do this. We can either start with Mr. Shields and work our way back, or start with Mr. Anderson and work back. We do have, the Vice Mayor and I have any thoughts on how you want to proceed as far as questions go? All right, then I'm going to go ahead. We're going to start with Mr. Shields, and maybe if we can just, and we'll start also with some disclosures. Vice Mayor Conley, did you want to go ahead and read one?
I make the following statement before City Council's receipt and consideration of the manager's report budget items, and before consideration of TO 20-03, a FY 2020 budget amendment. I am an employee of the Falls Church City School Board, and therefore I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons that may be affected by the FY 2020 budget. I can participate in this matter fairly objectively and in the public interest.
And I similarly want to make a statement. I make the following statement before City Council's receipt of the manager's report on budget items and before consideration of TO 20-03, an amendment to the FY 2020 budget. Do I have the wrong disclosure here, City Manager? This isn't an amendment, is it, to the 2020 budget?
Next one. It's the manager in our next amendment.
I know, so don't we have one for this as well? Okay, I'm sorry. An amendment to the FY 2020 budget. My wife's an employee of the Falls Church City School Board, and therefore I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons that may be affected by the FY 2020 budget. I can participate in the matter fairly objectively in the public interest. All right, well, let's go ahead with questions from including the public, that this is the start of a process. There's plenty more plenty more meetings, plenty more discussion, plenty more opportunities for public comments. So tonight is just the start of a long process, and so I think we need to keep that in mind as we discuss, our discussion begins tonight. So with that, Mr. Duncan?
Can I just start with a couple of quick things for Greg?
Of course.
First, I'm shocked that this is the first full-blown presentation you've ever made to council, because I feel like, we've often said up here that you feel like the 8th city council member because you've attended. I I haven't missed a meeting. Hardly any of us miss meetings, but the man is at every meeting. And seriously, that, is a huge commitment because we know you've got plenty of other meetings. But two, it's fostered you and your colleagues have fostered a very productive working relationship with the current council. And as somebody who came in 8 years ago believing that, in order for the community and the schools to prosper, we needed to grow the local economy so as to provide the resources for the deep well of want that we all have for excellence in every endeavor. It's encouraging to see after all these years that is the way things have turned out, and that when times are that we're trying to fit our budgets into the economic growth that we've been able to accomplish, and we appreciate you all doing that. We also understand that the general buoyancy of the regional economy that Mr. Shields referred to is not forever, and so it's always good to live close to the bone because you never know when one of those years is going to turn up when we all have to, midway through make some adjustments. The only specific question I had was, I know down in Richmond there had been some talk about, and by the way, it's very encouraging to hear that we're getting more, even though it's not a huge amount, it's a significant uptick, I think. I mean, I recall that our budget from Richmond was, down below 10% at some point, I think, their contribution to our budget. Mr. Snyder has spoken a lot about that over the years, and it's nice to see that number going up too. The minimum wage work that they've done down there in the current General Assembly, I'm just wondering how many employees do we have, and this is true of the city too, who are earning, the equivalent of hourly minimum wage, and do we as a city or in the school system have a plan for accelerating that number? Hopefully at least as fast as Richmond contemplates, maybe a little faster. Is that a knowable fact?
It is. It is not known to me at the moment, however. So
I mean to throw a stumper at you, but it was on my mind when I read about the General Assembly's work.
It's a great question, and one we're sort of proud to be able to answer. The first step in the new minimum wage is to go up to $9.50 an hour. And currently we don't have any employees that are below that number. So we'll at least meet the first threshold, and we'll begin to plan for the next round of advancement on the minimum wage scale, which I think is $12 after that.
Okay, great. Well, I'd encourage that. I mean, there was some talk, that Richmond might have gone a little faster in their plans to increase the minimum wage because as we all know, even at an increased rate, it's not enough to support a family with less than 2 or 3 jobs probably. But I would love to see Falls Church be a leader in that area if we can, and set a standard that other school systems would look up to. Oh, and the only other question I had for you, I think I asked you this once, and this may also not be knowable. Is there another jurisdiction in the globe which aspires to be a, pre-K through 12 IB program in a jurisdiction of our small size?
That aspires to be a pre-K-12 school district or the best?
We aspire and have achieved excellence. Is there any other jurisdiction smaller than us that has, the same kind of aspirations?
There are in the country that are our size that have aspirational goals as well. I don't know that they read exactly like ours, but we do in some ways benchmark against those districts and feel like we are doing a really great job in comparison. So we are certainly giving, I think, IB school divisions around the country something to shoot to. And to that point, just as a very quick aside, last Monday I had an opportunity to sit on a panel at Bronx Community College with a variety of IB school divisions from around the country. And we were invited there for a reason by the director of IB, and it was because of our great work here in the city of Falls Church.
That's great. Well, the only reason I asked that, there's a lot of measurements that you see in magazines and online, and everybody's got a,
Sure.
And I know you all have, it's a full-time job keeping up with all of them and how they do their measurings, but I just think it's important for the people in the community to understand that we have very high standards that we seek to achieve for a jurisdiction, although affluent, which is small. I mean, we are a small jurisdiction. And it's a commendable endeavor that you all are engaged in, and we